now we're ready to animate the car. So we're going to make sure that our playhead's at 0 seconds, 0 frames, so we can basically start creating the path that we want to use to lay this all up. And what we're going to do now is we are going to select that artist layer, which is that car. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start setting up some keyframes. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit P on there, and you can see we had a keyframe that basically lined it up in the center of the screen. So what we want to do now is we want to take that X value and we're going to drag it, and we're going to drag it off of the screen. It doesn't have to be all the way off screen. We can have it just a little bit, but I'm just going to take it right off the edge of the screen. And you see a new keyframe appear. So now when it plays, you see it puts the car into the center of the screen. And that's basically why I put that first position in there. So that gives you an idea of what's happening there. Now I'm going to take my playhead. I'm going to go out to 220. And at 220, again, I'm going to make some changes in here as well. And that is going to allow me to start taking and moving this car around the way I want it to go. So what I'm going to do now is, because I want to put a placeholder keyframe here, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the same values kind of stay the same here with this car. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I line all this stuff up, because what happens is when I start doing some properties, some changes to properties, things are going to start kind of going a little wonky with my positions and paths. And this is where you kind of want to be careful to basically drop some keyframes. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to hit this, because it's going to erase all my other keyframes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically add a keyframe with this button here, which is now going to keep the car kind of along those paths. And then what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to do the same thing at 6 seconds there and about, is I'm going to add another keyframe here. So that way the car is consistent through all these elements here, okay? And what I can do now is I can take these keyframes and I can start moving them around to kind of get the effect that I'd like to get happening. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to kind of shorten up some of this a little bit. And what I'll do is I'm going to get the car to do some different stuff here. So I'm going to get to this point here, because at this point I want basically Gordon's head off, this whole thing off the screen. So what I'm going to do is somewhere back, maybe we'll take this keyframe here back to a little bit further. Maybe we'll go back to 2 seconds. Actually, you know what? We'll go back a little bit further. And what we'll do is we'll get Gordon here driving along, and then we'll take this keyframe here and we'll move it slightly up to just past 2 seconds. So we got these placeholders here. So Gordon's basically going to stay in these positions. And now what we'll do is we'll start setting up the next paths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a few frames after, I should say, maybe up to 2:10 or something like that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start messing around with some other values. So I'm going to basically click on that artist layer and hit S, which is the scale value. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that and change that to 80. And then it's going to click off. And because there's a lock, it's going to change both of those values. And of course, I'm going to click to put a keyframe there. So you're going to see how the car now is a lot smaller, even Gordon's head, because it's linked to that keyframe that has that new value of 80%. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. a little bit. Maybe we'll say we'll go to like 220 or something like that. And at 220, what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to see some other um, properties. So I'm going to close this up, open it up so I can see all the transform properties. So I'm going to put multiple values on different properties. So what I'm going to do now is another thing here is I'm going to basically mess around with the position values. So what I want to do basically is get two things to happen here. I'm going to get um, initially, I'm going to get Gordon's car and his head on position to basically drop below the screen. So I'm going to pull this down here, okay, which is going to create that effect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scale at this same value and change it now to 100%. And of course, it's going to do this. So it's going to scale up. Gordon's going to kind of plop down kind of below the frame. He gets a lot bigger. And I'm also at that same value, that's those same keyframe values that I put at 220. I'm also going to put a placeholder for the rotation. So I'm going to drop a keyframe for rotation because I'm going to create some, again, some cool effects here. And now what I'm going to do is I want to basically kind of take this playhead and advance it about 3 frames. And what I'm going to do is I am going to create basically a wheelie. And because I put that keyframe holding those values 0 times 0 degrees, what I'm going to do is go to the 0 plus 0.0 degrees. I'm going to add a value of minus 14 in there and click off, and you see Gordon pops a wheelie. And because I put that anchor point at the back fin of the car, it gives me that effect of a wheelie. And now what I'm going to do is take my playhead and I'm going to advance it. I don't know, maybe we'll go out to like, let's see, let's go out to about, say about 305. And what I'll do now is I'll finish off the moves. And to do that, I'm just going to take the position values and I'm going to basically take it so Gordon just flies right off the screen. That is just simply done by taking these X and Y values, and I'll get them to go off of the screen. And then I'll also take that Y value and get them to kind of fly up at the same time. So now when I play this back, you can see this whole kind of motion here, right, when I drag it through here. So you can see when I hit all these keyframes, drops off the face of the earth, and then it does that wheelie, and then it kind of flies off the screen. So that just gives you an idea of how all those values are going to work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all these properties because I don't want to change any of those keyframes. And again, I want to turn motion blur on to kind of create that motion blur effect. But I also have to turn motion blur on for the head layer as well, because even though I have to put it on both of those layers. So you're not going to really see the motion blur really kick in until you get those really quick succession of movements in the keyframes, okay? So the motion blur doesn't have much of an effect here, and that's fine. You see it in the beginning because the car moves in fast, and then you don't really see it again until it kind of gets to this point here where it kind of flies off the screen, and that's, where those motion blurs really kind of show their usefulness, right? Because you're only going to see them when the subject is moving faster than the frame rate or the shutter on your camera, which basically this is kind of emulating at this point. Okay.